Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to build a house for a blacksmith and I'm just kind of winging it. But I did lay out the building and I decided to switch that over to wool so that you guys could see it if you wanted to count the blocks and try to build this in your own Minecraft world. So let's get right into it. I started in the back with some stone blocks. I will texture this later. I made the first wall about 2 blocks high and then I popped in a furnace and some blast furnaces. After that I continued up a total of 5 blocks. At the front side of the 5th row, not here where I start to put these stairs, but the next row up, right there, I put stairs and then put in the 5th row. After that, I went up to 8 blocks tall in total. 1 block above the furnaces and the blast furnaces, I put upside down stairs, and behind the furnaces, I put magma blocks. Then I put some full blocks on top of these stairs, and I went ahead and sealed that off and continued the front side wall up to match all the others. If you're in survival, make sure to come down in here and either fill those up or put a torch in. 1 block below the top, I put in hay bales covered with campfires, and that will increase the smoke. And then I started to narrow the tower slightly. And then from here, I took it up until I was happy with the height. And at the top, I installed some spruce trapdoors on top of these stairs to complete the chimney. Then I started to texture all of the exterior stone walls with different stone variants, stone bricks, andesite, smooth stone, cobblestone, things of that nature. I used stone walls here on these corners of the tallest part of the tower. And again, I used different variants of the stone walls. I decided it was a little too square still, and I extended these stone walls ultimately all the way down within 2 blocks of the ground. I switched to some deep slate and started popping little pieces of this in because this is a sooty operation. There's a lot of heat involved, and I think that's a good way to mimic the look of wear and tear and soot and things like that. So I just peppered some of these in here where I thought it looked good. So that about wraps up the chimney, and I started working on the walls. I put in these spruce log pillars. These are 4 high, and I went around to each corner and went ahead and installed those, and then with the cross beams. And I usually like to leave these hang over by one to give it a look like they're logs that are interlocked. The interior walls are made of spruce planks. These bottom blocks over here I ultimately switched out for barrels, and I'll work on that momentarily. The next part is the outdoor lean-to section of the blacksmith. So I used oak fences here and brought them over and ultimately on top of the barrels. Once the fences were installed, I used campfires to completely cover the top. It's a little smoky when you do this, so make sure you have a shovel. And if you're in survival, definitely be careful. Once all of the campfires were in, I removed some of them and replaced them with different trapdoors just to give everything a worn out type of feel. Using spruce planks, I went ahead and worked on the framework of the interior walls. All of these will get textured somewhat later, and I will put in windows here in just a little bit. I continued the logs across the rest of the structure and out by the front door and filled in the rest of these walls. It was time to start working on the roof, and oftentimes what I like to do is just start on one end and get the rough shape of the roof in place first and make sure I'm happy with that. Once that's done, I will extend the roof line on down the length of the building, and I know that I've got something that I should be pleased with, but it doesn't mean you can't make changes. I extended this end of the roof out 1 more block, and then I started working on the roof over the front door. This was mostly slabs, but I thought it turned out just fine, and I thought it meshed in with the other roof really well. I added some stairs underneath to give it a little bit more shape. Next, I used oak wood to just change up some of the color tones in the top of this roof. I think it makes it look more aged, gives it a little bit more depth and texture, especially from a distance. Once I was done with the oak wood, I switched over to deep slate, and I gave the edge of the entire roof a deep slate border, and I think this turned out quite nice. At the end of the log here, I added a grindstone and a chain. It sort of looks like a pulley that might be hauling something up. I installed a spruce trapdoor and a chest. Ultimately, I think it's a little bit too long, and if I was doing this in survival, I would change it. I started to trim out the windows, and originally I used spruce, but it just blended in too well, so I switched to oak wood. I used upside down stairs and spruce trapdoors to make little arches. I used oak trapdoors to make a couple of planter areas in front of the windows. Above the door, I put in an upside down oak stair, and I trimmed the sides of the door with oak fencing. I like this a lot, and it's something I'll do more of. I wanted to experiment with some fence gates, so I used oak fence gates above the door also, and topped them off on the ends with just regular fencing. I like the way this looks. Let me know what you think in the comments. I wanted to texture these walls, so I used some stripped oak planks, and even some stripped dark oak, which I actually think turned out really well, and I might do this a lot more in the future. It really breaks up the pattern of the wall and gives everything a little bit more interest. I capped off the gates with some fences. I installed fences in these areas because it sort of seems like support, and it also gives me a place to hang lanterns from. I installed lanterns around the perimeter of the building hanging from the fence post, and I also put in some shroom lights in the planter boxes and other locations around the building. Using different leaf blocks, azalea leaves work well, and other leaves, I filled in spaces above the shroom lights, and I really like the way this turned out. It's one of my favorite lighting methods to use. I really wanted to use some signs as decoration, so along this edge of the building I installed some, and I really like the way it turned out, but my favorite spot was around these posts here in the front, except for that one when I broke it. But I really think this looks cool, and it adds another layer of depth to your build, so I will do this more often also. I used fences and some gates on this end of the building, as well as a lantern to top that off, and repeated the sign pattern on this side. It was time to work on my front door, and actually this time I went with a jungle door, which I rarely do, but I really think it fits this build well. It was time to work on the floor, so I removed all these blocks, and I went back to the deep slate, especially by the furnaces, for that sooty look. And over on this end, it will be where the blacksmith lives, so I used mostly stone bricks. I installed ladders and built a loft up here to use for extra storage with some chests and barrels. I capped off the end of the roof with dark oak fencing. I decided to remove this log and install another ceiling or floor above the work area. I had these in incorrectly the first time. They're supposed to flip up for a railing. That worked out pretty well, and that's something I'll do again. I installed a couple more lanterns, and it was time for the glass. After the windows were installed, I needed to put some of the comforts of home, so I put in a bed and a barrel and a crafting table, and no blacksmith would be complete without a smithing table and some other workstations. I put in some pots, and I used azalea bushes and sticks to complete those, as well as an ender chest. We must have an ender chest. And then I started texturing the rest of these walls, using again the stripped oak, the oak slabs, and some stripped dark oak. I really like the way this look comes out. Let me know what you think in the comments. It was time for me to start working on the ground outside underneath the lean-to. The way I've been doing paths lately is with gravel, coarse dirt, rooted dirt, and even some brown mushroom blocks. The rooted dirt, I think, just adds another layer of depth, and the brown mushroom blocks almost look like straight up mud when you incorporate it with the rest of these things. I used the same style in front of the front door, and I started to get random with things to break up the edges, and I'll work on that next to the lean-to as well. I want to use this same pattern and experiment with actual mud blocks also. I finished off the roof above the front door with some dark oak fences up in the gabled end, and I installed another torch on a chain. The spruce log that runs the length of the house, I used buttons just to break up the straight line and provide a little bit of spawn proofing. I broke up the borders for the straight lines on the ground around the lean-to and used more path blocks to make this look a little more blended in. I really liked the way everything was coming along so far. I installed a couple of work tables using spruce trapdoors and fences underneath the lean-to for a place to work. And out front here, I decided to replace the lantern with a sign. So this will be the smithy's house, so that's what we're going to call the place. And I think we're going to use some glow ink on this as well. I put a few more bushes around the roof just to give the place a weathered look and kind of overgrown feel. You know, this is outside. And no blacksmith would be complete without horses. These horses are here waiting to be shod. This is a blacksmith, so I'm sure there's a farrier who works here. I put in a few more chains just for looks, and I decided to use some glow item frames to hang around the place, and the blacksmith could advertise some of his best tools here. The spruce log that runs the length of the house, I decided to break up the edge of it even more using some spruce slabs, and now it was somewhat more spawn proof. Just a few finishing touches, I added another spruce floor or balcony to this area, and it really gives you more storage in a small space. So this is something I'll remember when I'm actually building my own house, if it's small, in my Minecraft hardcore series. I really appreciate you guys watching this video, and if you've watched this far, thank you so much for sticking around. It really helps the channel. If you feel like liking and subscribing, that would be outstanding. It'll help us grow. Until next time, this is Devil Dog MC, over and out.